Blizzard killed Diablo 4. It wasn't Path of Exile 1, it wasn't Path of Exile 2, and it wasn't even Last Epoch. Blizzard set the massively anticipated sequel to Diablo 3 up for tremendous failure from its very beginnings, and it wasn't even a single individual responsible, but a mix of members from this titan. Executives, designers, developers, community managers, content creators, and more. And in this video, I'm going to lay out exactly how Diablo 4 was doomed to fall victim to its competitors from the outset, despite incredible sales, unprecedented hype, and banger critical reviews. Fellow Exiles, welcome. I am Try. Let's talk some Diablo 4, Blizzard, and unprecedented levels of doom. The start of its doom. Dev talks. Diablo 4's demise didn't truly begin until we first heard the developers utter how they were starting and iterating on its game design. The poorly received announcement of Diablo Immortal surely didn't help prepare D4 for success, but thanks to the legendary cinematic geniuses at Blizzard, their upcoming game's face was saved for a bit. People were excited about D4. It's going to be so much better than Diablo 3. It's a return to the franchise's origins in Diablo and Diablo 2. Player decisions are totally gonna matter. Players new and old to Blizzard games in Diablo were hyped. They were huffing that cinematic-fueled hopium, and, unfortunately, the developers began to speak about the game. It was all okay at first. The developers were quite open about the design of the game and what they were trying to achieve. They posted quarterly blogs about their design decisions, how everything was going, and what we'd see in the near future. While it excited most players, a select few immediately noticed glaring mistakes and issues in the game design and brought as much attention to them as possible. Evident examples included the initial look at the skill twigs for characters in Diablo 4, the stats which were initially devised as big number good, low number bad, and the sincere lack of discussion about itemization, one of the biggest foundational pillars in loot-based ARPGs. Again, unfortunately, the developers seemed well-intentioned, but their response and choices in design continue to be terrible, and that's evident even now in the current state of the game in March of 2024, a good 9 months after launch. Advice was ignored. Poor design continued. The developers kept talking, letting loose more and more information about the game, and the more they did so, the more clear it became that these were not veterans. These were not people well-versed in game design and truly educated on what was successful and what was not. They were novices who thought they knew better. It's a shame too, because novices who respect their predecessors can make some pretty awesome stuff. Just take a brief look at Path of Exile 1. That was a team of novices brought together on a shoestring budget who absolutely loved the game design choices the Blizzard North developers made with Diablo 2. They based their entire game structure on that foundation, poured passion into the project, and evolved the game from there. It was a huge success. Path of Exile 1 is still their only title, but Grinding Gear Games has gone from a team of 3 to a team of 250 plus employees across the world. Now, they're looking to release a sequel that will be even bigger and more ambitious than their first title, learning from their own past mistakes, the mistakes of competition, and the lessons learned by other developers. But Path of Exile 1 and 2 aren't the only credible examples of this. Take a gander at the recent release of Last Epoch, a game completely sculpted to tear out what its developers saw as mistakes of the game we just spoke about, Path of Exile 1. They made a great ARPG, and they all, like GGG, began as complete novices with a non-existing budget. Even now, they're still tiny, but their game spread ripples across the entire gaming landscape with its tremendous but rocky launch on Steam. There we have two examples of game design done well, and one example of it done poorly. Blizzard weren't learning from others' mistakes, or the mistakes they made in the past either. They were just pushing forward with a game they knew could have mass initial appeal and make an absolute Titanic-sized boatload of money. And if crafting a compelling game, a game perfect for some but not for all, wasn't the path forward, then what was? The solidification of its doom: marketing. Diablo 4, without a doubt, had the largest marketing campaign ever in the history of gaming. And you know what? It worked. It worked extremely well. Blizzard catapulted Diablo 4 not only into the gaming spotlight, but into the mainstream light of day. We saw Lilith plastered on billboards in New York City. Oddly enough, while it was having a huge smoky disaster occur due to wildfires to the north. We suffered through a spicy Kentucky Fried Chicken cross Diablo 4 collaboration in which you could literally buy food from KFC for Diablo 4 rewards. We witnessed Megan Fox reading off ways in which a character died in an extremely deadpan manner, something that should have nominated her for some sort of Oscar, just as Diablo 4 totally should have been nominated for Game of the Year. On top of that, Blizzard flooded the internet with ads about Diablo 4. Reddit, Twitch, Twitter, my email. Everywhere I looked, I saw Diablo 4 advertisements. Additionally, Blizzard chose to hold multiple beta weekends. Could you hear the quotation marks on that line, my friend? Each beta weekend allowed players to experience an extremely curated experience on a specific set of classes with access to a limited set of content. Players even received rewards for participating in the beta experience too. Obviously, to everyone, this was not a beta, this was yet another marketing ploy. Immediately after the beta ended, Blizzard drummed up its success, showcasing just how many played and were pumped about Diablo 4. It wasn't only Blizzard handing out the cups of hypium by the mug. Certain content creators and critical outlets praised the beta experience. Diablo 4 will be a masterpiece. Diablo 4 has the best opening ARPG experience I've ever seen. Diablo 4 is Blizzard's best game yet. Videos poured out across YouTube buying into the hype. We had critiques of Blizzard for getting the company's past mistakes. We had people who believed the entire game would be just as fun as it was in that blip of a beta. Then we had some suspicious people who understood what was coming because they remembered Diablo 3, a game which had an excellent beta and opening experience, only to be a complete disaster upon launch. Now, for just a moment, compare Diablo 4's marketing campaign to Path of Exiles. You might be scratching your head a bit. Do you not remember Einhar's Roa singles from Wendy's and that collab? How about Sydney Sweeney reading off scripts on Exiles ripping to the void? Am I the only one who saw that one billboard in Las Vegas that said, "Still sane, Exile"? Wait, you don't? Well, that's because it doesn't exist. As a complete polar opposite to Diablo 4, Path of Exile doesn't use paid ads online. It doesn't do a bunch of collabs to bring in people not interested in their game. The only ads I've ever seen are for streamers watching the big PoE reveal videos. That's it. It's because Path of Exile relies on word of mouth. It relies on people showing and explaining why and how Path of Exile is a good game. It's a bold approach, but it's much cheaper than what Blizzard does, and if your game is good, you truly shouldn't be worried. Your game will steadily grow of its own accord, not because you shoved it and a bunch of collabs into a bunch of people's faces. Every single second and cent of marketing set up Diablo 4 for an unprecedented launch in terms of player numbers, sales metrics, and potential to be a successful, long-running live service game. Well, did it work? The further cementing of its doom release. Diablo 4 released on June 6, 2023 to enormous initial... Wait. Let me fix that real quick. Diablo 4 really released on June 1st, 2023 to massive financial success. To Blizzard's credit, there were very few launch issues with Diablo 4 in terms of playing the game on launch. People could play rather well, despite a few small queue issues to start out. However, that meant people could, well, play the game. That's not a W for Blizzard, everyone. Despite an initial hype period for the first week or so after the real launch, by the real launch on 6/6/2023, numerous players were experiencing dire flaws with the game, especially those accustomed to playing ARPGs. To name several. Stash tabs were extremely limited and rudimentary. We found out why later. The open world was dead, super easy, and pointless. We realized it was just pretty. Character options were ridiculously streamlined, silly, or simple but convoluted. I'm talking everything from our skill twigs to the variable damage increase affixes and the poor itemization systems. Endgame did not exist. That's it. That's the line. Bosses were boring, terrible, or bugged. Asmongold and I are looking at you, Uber Lilith. Yeah, that's just several. And these problems weren't simple fixes either. Some aren't even fixed in the present. Regardless, Blizzard and their stands touted Diablo 4 as a success. It was the fastest selling, highest selling Blizzard game of all time. That's an achievement, right? Well, I suppose, but it's also not a surprise. Blizzard's design, however terrible it might have been, was at least partially intentional along with its excellent marketing campaign. The majority of those who bought Diablo 4, I'd reckon, bought it to play through it once, or maybe not even that much. They may have purchased it because they heard, Diablo, oh, I know Diablo, I'll hang out with him sometime. They then played the campaign, played a bit of the game, and will touch it again in a few years, or they never even logged on. I guarantee you this. The people who sought a true Diablo experience, who want a good ARPG to sink their 20s, 30s, 40s, maybe even 50s into, they were instantly let down. Diablo 4 was not designed with them in mind, even though the developers and the marketing initially claimed it was, and because of that, the player base instantly began to break down. Releases are tricky. If you have a good launch with a good game, you're golden. If you have a good launch with a bad game, you'll be alright initially, but then begin to falter quickly. If you have a bad launch with a good game, then you'll recover. Honestly, in the ARPG space, I cannot think of a game that has had a good launch initially and was a good game, but Palworld is a great non-ARP example of a good game with a good launch. They're thriving. On the ARPG end of good game, bad launch, we just had Last Epoch officially go live, and despite a ridiculously rocky first week, people are still playing now. They were trying to play during the launch, and they will play for a long time after. I'm hoping Path of Exile 2 will be the first live service ARPG that has a good launch and is a good game. We'll see soon. It's not a crazy complex formula, but it's evidently hard to nail down. With players who sought more out of a supposed live service PC Diablo experience, the game was truly dying. So, with a dwindling player base, unrest in the public sphere, and a lack of a supplemental substantial marketing campaign, how did the Diablo 4 team plan to tackle their growing list of problems? The death spirals. Initial updates. The initial set of 4 released or outlined Diablo 4 updates were certainly a double-edged sword. On one side, they proved the team of developers over at Blizzard understood the problems with the game. I'd suppose mostly thanks to an absolutely uproaring player base. But on the other side of this very dangerous sword, it quickly became apparent, as with the initial design of the game, they had no idea what they were doing or how to fix any of their game design problems. For example, they knew players wished for a proper endgame with proper bosses, so they made that a priority and released a set in Season 2. However, the bossing system was needlessly convoluted and not personally rewarding. The bosses were terribly unfun to fight and not too challenging, and nothing grand was on the horizon. The entire bossing meta rapidly boiled down to join max-size party, share Uber Duriel fragments, kill Uber Duriel, see if Uber uniques drop, go again. The problem was noticed, but it was not solved spectacularly well. Again, we can look at the seasonal mechanic for Season 3, which allowed players to have a little robot companion to fight alongside them. Players could build up their robot using items suspiciously similar to Path of Exile support gems, but players immediately complained the bot was too weak. So Blizzard buffed it within the first week. Not long after, the bot was downing Uber bosses and everything else in its path in less than 10 seconds. Alone. The Diablo 4 developers knew players wanted power, they wanted something cool, but they made it ridiculously easy to build and far too broken. We see this happening over and over, and it's scary to think what might happen with the next big fix on the docket, itemization. The tremendous Diablo 4 saving itemization overhaul is supposed to arrive with Season 4. We're actually supposed to see a glimpse of it the day this video hits. It's fine to be optimistic and hope for the best, especially since apparently creators like Dark Microtransaction, Riker, Zizarin, Woodyjoe, and Rax supposedly had some insider access and input. However, given their current log of supposed fixes and additions, I'm pessimistic and, I'd argue, realistic. Every time this happens, every time a change comes in and worsens the experience or just doesn't feel right to the player, it slams another nail in Diablo 4's coffin and lowers the confidence of its remaining player base. Even when developers try to chime in on why things are the way they are, it hurts. When Joseph Pipiora explained that stash tabs are limited in Diablo 4 because every time you see another player, you load every single one of their items in stash tabs, and needing to do that for hundreds of tabs would be a disaster, the Diablo 4 and greater ARPG player base reacted as you would expect. Updates and developer insight into your game shouldn't cause consistent uproar or make your game worse. When Path of Exile 1 was first rolling out patches, people were excited and awaiting each one, and the game continued to improve. Last Epoch has already outlined what they're doing with their 1.1 release too, and they seem to be on the right track. D4 just isn't. While the game continues to spiral slowly toward its eventual demise, what might be its ultimate deciding factor? What will seal the fate of the most anticipated Blizzard release of all time? The Death Throes expansion. Hey, wait a second, you're probably saying after reading that chapter title. In what alien world is an expansion to a game its Death Throes? Well, if you manage to handle something as poorly as Blizzard, anything is possible. Remember that, my friend. Diablo 4's first expansion, the Vessel of Hatred, or as I like to call it, the Basket of Hatred, launches later this year. This paid expansion to this game that also has a box price, has a cash shop, and a battle pass with multiple tiers is expected to contain much of the improvements to the game people are looking for. Supposedly, it'll have several of these things. Big endgame, a new character class, more story, deeper character options, a new diverse culture, an actual buff villain, big endgame, more battle passes, even more battle passes, awesome cinematics, more big endgame. Doesn't that all sound great? Of course it does, and it'll be packed into the likely $70 plus price point of the Basket of Hatred. Now, that's an expensive basket for a game that was already released unpolished, early, and to massive complaints from its most dedicated sect of players. Still, the expansion is probably one lit cinematic from being Blizzard's best-selling expansion of all time. I much prefer the approach taken by Last Epoch and Path of Exile. Last Epoch is a pay-once, play-forever game with a cosmetic cash shop and supporter packs. That's fine. I get all the gameplay with one purchase. Path of Exile is a free-to-play game with a cosmetic and convenience cash shop with supporter packs and a pseudo battle pass. Again, totally fine with that. I can choose not to pay, or pay at least once for some nice stash convenience, and I'll get all the gameplay I could ever want for free. Now, that's not true with Diablo 4 or the Basket of Hatred. It's probably the first of many baskets. Whatever expansion 1 does not deliver with its $70 price point, the second basket 100% will. I can see it now. Diablo 4, the Basket of Pain. Or maybe the Basket of Hell. Oh, aren't we in for such a treat? As you can probably tell, I am too proud of my Basket of Hatred meme explanation and think it's way funnier than it actually is. You can say that all you'd like, I am good with it, but it's still unabashedly true. Blizzard are flinging everything possible into this basket, and if it succeeds, I'll be absolutely floored. Let's sum all the doom up. That's the rundown, everyone. No matter how you spin it, you cannot blame the death of Diablo 4 on the Last Epoch developers. You cannot trace it back to the Path of Exile team either. You cannot put the blame on a sole individual, like Bobby Kotick, Rod Ferguson, or whoever wrote the death of Deckard Cain back in Diablo 3. Everything wrong with the game lies solely on the backs of Blizzard as a whole. Without fail, they hyped up their game to numerous millions, released an unpolished, subpar product, squandered constant updates, and keep on promising to be better in the future. I'd call it an abusive relationship, as it really sounds like one, but people are choosing to play and support this game. Simply don't. Don't buy into the excitement. Don't believe them when they say, "I'm sorry. Here's a cinematic of Inarius squashing another demon." And don't buy their games until they prove themselves. Instead, support those who care about their consumers, care about player opinion, and care about their games. Blizzard believes the cash must flow. If it stops flowing, well, then all hell will actually break loose and we might actually get a based Diablo in a Diablo game in the next decade. That's a rare W in countless possible futures for the Diablo franchise. I'd rather it become reality than have my preferred games continue to dominate forevermore. Competition is welcome from Blizzard, but it's unlikely. Here's a tremendous thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end, and a massive thank you to each and every one of my supporters. I'm talking to you patrons, members, and subs over on the Purple Streaming website. you can join the community for free by subscribing to this channel and joining our Discord, or you can get me to make more content by clicking on one of my support links in the description. Anyways, that's all for this one. Talamoana, Exiles.